This podcast is brought to you by Kleenex Lotion Tissues. You can't predict sick days, but with Kleenex Lotion Tissues, you can be better prepared for them while helping keep your skin healthy. Kleenex Lotion Tissues moisturize to help prevent skin irritation while you're battling those unwanted cold and flu symptoms. It's extra care when you need it most. Keep relief within reach. Grab Kleenex Lotion Tissues to help avoid the added discomfort of irritated skin during cold and flu season. For whatever happens next, grab Kleenex.
Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Shopify is there to help you grow. Shopify helps you sell everywhere, from their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system. Shopify's got you covered. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms, and sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. What I love about Shopify is how no matter how big you want to grow, Shopify gives you everything you need to take control and take your business to the next level. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S., and Shopify is the global force behind Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
This episode is brought to you by Opill, the first over-the-counter daily birth control pill available in the U.S. Opill is FDA approved, full prescription strength, and estrogen-free. Plus, there's no prescription needed. Finally, the days of needing a prescription for birth control are over. Opill is available online and at most major retailers. Take control of your health and reproductive journey with Opill. Birth control in your control. Use code BIRTHCONTROL for 25% off your first month of Opill at opill.com.
Good?
Yep.
All right, welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan. Our co-host, Nick Stevens, unfortunately cannot be here tonight, but we're very happy to be joined by someone who at the last moment stepped up, offered to fill in as the third co-host. That is Andy Kostka of the Baltimore Banner. Andy, good to have you back on.
Thank you for having me always.
And on tonight's episode, we're going to look back at the 2024 season, but more importantly, we're going to look ahead to the offseason and to 2025. We don't want to dwell on all the bad stuff tonight. That's not why we're here. And we'll get to all of that in just a moment. But first, Orioles on the Verge is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything sports betting. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. With the largest catalog of odds on everything from football, MLB playoffs, NHL, NBA, to political props. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or on one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. Now, on tonight's show, we're going to look back at the 2024 season. We're going to look ahead to the 2024-2025 offseason. But first, we're happy to welcome back to the show our host for tonight, Dennis Nash, the taproom manager here at Checkerspot Brewing. Dennis, come on up.
Thanks for coming back, guys. I didn't think I'd see you again, so wish we were under better circumstances.
It's good to be back here. How are you holding up?
I'm doing okay. I mean, we did win the Relish Run condiment race in the South Brewery District, so I'm kind of like, I'm okay with that. It beats what happened with the Birds.
I want to start right there because the Orioles introduced the in-person mascot race this year, but for my money, the race that goes on down here is much better because I have yet to see ketchup, mustard, or relish at Camden Yards balance a beer can on their head while completing the race. So give us a little bit more background about how you found the person who can actually do that.
Well, we've won it both years. The first year we had one of our marketing directors do it. She's a super athlete. This year I picked someone based on being at the day they gave out the shirts at Camden Yards. My nephew's next door neighbor ate a hot dog in about 20 seconds. And then he slugged a beer in like 3 seconds. I'm like, what are you doing on this date? Because I need a new athlete. But he actually trained as a Marine. He It was like a combat line in training. They taught you to keep your head level. So he actually was practicing. He sent us videos of him training, running around his house with a can on his head. We thought he was kidding, but he was really training.
So it was good to see Checkerspot win again. Now, there's a lot that goes on here, and in fact, I saw that you're having an event here in a few weeks where you can bring your old pumpkin and smash it. Is that right?
Actually, they're going to supply the pumpkins. It's a wellness coach for people who have gone through a breakup, so they're going to smash things out back and make a big mess, and we won't allow them in the tap room. But it should be kind of interesting. We host a lot of interesting things throughout the year.
Absolutely, and we're glad to be back here. Now, before I let you go, I want to ask you a question. We're going to actually ask every guest on tonight's episode, what is the one move that the Orioles should make this offseason?
I think they need to find a veteran that can give a clubhouse presence. I feel like they lack in someone to say, hey, look, guys, we're in the postseason. Remain calm. Don't panic. Don't do things like swing at stuff way outside. Patience, we looked impatient at the plate. And I feel like they need someone like that, someone who's got 3 or 4 years with different teams. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head that's available, because I looked over the list, because kind of hoping I want to see what we retain with what we have. But I definitely feel like we need a veteran presence in there and someone to be a little bit more of a leader. I really thought that somebody would step up, but no one's trying to be like a captain. I think that's what we need.
Good thoughts, Dennis, and thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for having us back here.
My pleasure. Anytime, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Dennis Nash, the capital manager here at Checkerspot Brewing. And before we go on with tonight's program, I'm going to turn it over to Bob for a minute to shout out the members of our Patreon community who are in the room tonight.
This is always interesting. It seems like we have a different group of patrons other than Justin Daly, who's always here. Thank you for being, well, to be fair, he works here. But Matt Winter is here. And Kevin Brown is here. He promised he'd be more positive since he's here in person, so thanks guys for making it out.
Good to thank you for coming here and thank you for your support all season long. As a reminder, you can sign up for a Patreon community for as little as $3 a month as a paying member. And we will have bonus coverage for you throughout the off season. And we've got a long winter ahead here with the Orioles season now in the books. Andy, I will start with you here because you've had a busy few days, a lot of turnover on the coaching staff. Can you break that down for us? What has happened in the last 3 or 4 days?
Yeah, so Brandon Hyde will be back next year, but a lot of other faces in that coaching staff are gone. Starting with Freddie Gonzalez, who is very experienced with previous Major League manager himself, was a great sounding board for Brandon Hyde. So that was a little bit of a surprise. It was not his choice to leave. That was a club decision. Either they're going to look for a new bench coach, or maybe they look internally for that new bench coach, aka Buck Britton. You never know, from AAA. Otherwise, two hitting coaches have departed. Who knows how many hitting coaches they will add? But with Ryan Fuller and Matt Borg-Schulte will be leaving, and then Jose Hernandez also is a coach with the Major League staff that is departing. He's been in the organization we talked about before the show for a very long time. Through the minor leagues, 2019 he became a Major League coach. They're going to have a bit of a reshuffle, and it seems as if this is going to be a lot of onus now on Brandon Hyde to say, okay, we're going to shift up the backroom staff, but if the team doesn't do necessarily as well as as they expect it to next year, they might have to look a little higher than hitting coach and bench coach in terms of reshuffling. So it's a big year in 2025, but definitely a new staff around him.
Is this a situation where a slow start to the season could get that hot seat going for Brandon Hyde?
I think well, it depends on who you ask. The hot seat could always be going for some people. It was going early in the second half for Brandon Hyde, but I think internally Mike Elias has given a lot of vote of confidence for Brandon Hyde. But at a certain point, you do need, it's 192 wins in 2 seasons and 0 postseason wins. And at a certain point, a team needs to win in the postseason. And not saying that is a rash decision, to make, Now, obviously, they're not making that decision. But next year, ask me the same question. If they don't win another playoff game, that might be a tougher conversation to have.
I want to go back to hitting coaches for a moment, because you wrote a piece in the Baltimore Banner maybe a month or more ago.
Yeah.
You interviewed some of the veterans of the team, including James McCann and Ryan O'Hearn, and they defended Ryan Fuller and Matt Borg-Schulte. Talked about what a good job they were doing, yet neither of them are back. Can you give us a little bit of insight into maybe how the players related to them and the work that they did?
Well, first off, I think the biggest criticism of that piece I saw online was that, are you going to badmouth your boss on record? Probably not. But I do think that the players had a lot of respect for both hitting coaches. They both did, they were a large reason why this offense was as good as it was last season, the beginning of this season. And also, neither hitting coach nor Cody Ashley, the offensive strategy coach, they did not take one swing of the bat in the second half. That's not their job, and yeah, there can be criticism that, maybe they should have figured out slumps, maybe, change of approach, some way to in philosophy to make things more smooth in the second half into the postseason. But it's not a immediate fix by just firing a hitting coach. It comes down to players need to respond, and they're, maybe it's a wake-up call that, hey, you're getting rid of the hitting coaches. Now they need to step up, the players, and realize there's going to be maybe not a new philosophy. My editors were asking about that today. Is there going to be a new hitting philosophy? I don't know, maybe Danielle Allentuck from the Banners in the audience, we can ask her the same question later when she's up here. I don't necessarily know. And, I don't know if there's going to be a new philosophy with a new hitting coach. But the front office, Mike Elias, Sig Meidel, they have learned, this is the way they've set up. This is the way they go about their business. I don't think there will be a dramatic shift in, they had 6 sacrifice bunts the entire season, tied for second fewest. I don't think you're suddenly going to see 36 next year. I don't think there's going to be a massive shift in that regard. But back to, just the hitting coaches at large. Players obviously respected them, but at a certain point, change is sort of inevitable when you don't have a promising postseason. And a source close to the matter said it was Ryan Fuller's decision to depart their organization, and Matt Borg-Schulte, is leaving for the Twins. So both, they're not necessarily ousted without something lined up. I don't know if Fuller technically has something lined up at this point, but Borg's does, and good luck to both of them in the future, because they did a lot of good work since 2022, I believe they joined, and they helped turn around a lineup.
Also, there was a lot of injuries. Jordan Westberg, Ramon Urias, we know the names, Ryan Mountcastle, and even whether or not Adley was quote-unquote injured, he was definitely seemed to be nagged by something in the second half. So, and you're counting on guys like Jackson Holliday and Kobe Mayo, as great of prospects that they are, which is true. It's a lot to count on them to lead an offense in the second half of a pennant chase. So there was other things, obviously, to keep in mind with the lack of performance in the second half. But do you have any leading candidates this early on? Obviously, it's still playoffs going on. Off-season hasn't started, but any names at the top of your head for these vacancies?
Well, it's too bad Danielle's not up here. She I don't know when this podcast is actually airing for people not here, but she wrote a story for Tuesday morning on candidates for that coaching position, hitting coach. A couple names could be Anthony Villa, player development coordinator, I believe is the title in the minor leagues, and he has a good track record. A lot of players around. Gunnar Henderson has spoken highly of him in the past, and Mike Montville is the current AAA Norfolk hitting coach. He's a possibility. Maybe Buck Britton. I kind of figured, reading tea leaves, that maybe Buck Britton, a longtime AAA manager, could be a great bench coach. But you never know. With the staff, he has a lot of experience leading, offenses in his career as well in the minor leagues. So he could be a fit for that position as well. It kind of remains to be seen as to whether it's internal or do they go external. We talked about before the show, last year when they had pitching coach changes, they went one external hire in Drew French, and they went one internally with Mitch Plasmeyer, and that seemed to do really well this season. I don't think anyone can really complain with what the pitching staff did, especially with how many injuries they had. So maybe that's the same direction they go, where they feel like one internal voice that a lot of the minor leaguers know already, somebody they have trust, they have chemistry with, and then you bring an outside voice in that they believe could really elevate the lineup. We'll see.
And before we introduce our guests, I do want to get your thoughts on this, which is that the pitching staff, for all the anxiety that there was leading up to the trade deadline and even early on in the second half, the pitching staff held up its end of the bargain down the stretch and in the postseason, but we know the Orioles likely are losing their ace in Corbin Burns. How do you think they're going to address the holes that they have this offseason?
Well, yes, Corbin Burns, I imagine, will be coveted by all 30 teams and realistically by 8 teams that could probably pay him somewhere in the ballpark of $300 million over 8 years or something like that. Just a ballpark number. Who knows? With David Rubenstein, maybe Baltimore is more in that conversation than they ever have been in the past. At the same time, we can assume that the high interest of in him elsewhere, maybe he will end up elsewhere. So assuming Corbin Burns ends up elsewhere, you have so many guys that are going to be mid-season 2025 returnees that you really need to add somebody via trade or free agency this winter to help the rotation in that first half of the season. Because I don't know if Kyle Bradish coming off of Tommy John, John Means coming off a second Tommy John, who else is on that list? Tyler Wells, coming second Tommy John for Tyler Wells. I mean, those are big rehab assignments ahead of all of them. They had them mid-season, June surgeries. Most likely will miss the beginning, if not even middle part of the season. So you're looking at midsummer getting reinforcements, which is great because the churn of pitchers in Major League Baseball more than ever before is severe, and their injuries are part of the game. It seems like it's even more part of the game than it ever has been in the past with pitching, especially with the high velocities, high spin rates, and the struggle that puts on your arm. So yeah, they probably will look at a trade or a free agent signing. Maybe not an ace signing because you feel like Grayson will be ready for 2025. Zach Eflin is a 1 or 2, but wherever you line up Grayson Rodriguez and Zach Eflin doesn't really matter, but one of them will be near the top of the rotation. Maybe you want a kind of fourth pitcher in there, somebody that not necessarily is going to lead your line on a postseason game. It's going to give you depth. They don't have that much pitching depth right now, although I imagine with Cade Povich is going to get another extended shot in the 2025 season for the rotation. He did great down the stretch. His last month of the season, September, was great. And then you're looking at somebody like Brandon Young could break through, and if he has good spring training, could be a kind of dark horse to make that rotation. So you never know.
We'll look at the offseason. Of course, the Orioles, we got to wait now until March 27th when the Orioles open at Toronto, a first-class city with a B-rate airport, but that's months in the making here. We have a couple of guests tonight. Danielle Allentuck of the Baltimore Banner is here. But first, we're going to be joined by the host of Locked On Orioles, Connor Newcombe. Connor, come on up.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Experience the performance of Lexus Racing, the thunderous V8 engine. The black and day-glow yellow Lexus RCF GT3, a blur of speed and adrenaline. The sheer force of acceleration. The physics-defying grip of the tires, the intensity of every corner, the precision of each maneuver. The sound of victory. Visit Lexus.com/motorsports to keep the thrill going.
This episode is brought to you by Opel, the first over-the-counter daily birth control pill available in the U.S. Opel is FDA approved, full prescription strength, and estrogen-free. Plus, there's no prescription needed. Finally, the days of needing a prescription for birth control are over. Opel is available online and at most major retailers. Take control of your health and reproductive journey with Opel. Birth control in your control. Use code BIRTHCONTROL for 25% off your first month of Opel at opel.com.
From multitasking multivitamins to prenatal for mom and baby, Ollie's got you through it all. Get what you need at Ollie.com. That's OLLY.com. Ollie! These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
You're so tall. It should not take this long to get to the stage.
I went as fast as I could.
So Connor, we had you on a few weeks ago, actually. I think it was about a week or two before the playoffs. And a lot has changed since then. The Orioles bounced early in the playoffs. Some of the coaching staff turnover we just discussed. How are you feeling about the state of the team right now?
I was much happier back then. I came on the last episode. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm over it finally. It's been almost 2 weeks. I've processed it and digested it, and other teams have been eliminated. One of the worst parts was, I believe, the Orioles were physically the first team eliminated from the postseason, so that was unfortunate. I don't know. It's intriguing to see Fuller and Borg-Schulte gone, but not in the way that a lot of the fan base would have wanted them to be gone. It wasn't, Michael Eyes didn't come out 2 days after the season and say we're firing our entire hitting staff. They kind of left on their own accord. And in terms of the roster, it's just a lot of time to sit. I feel like you got to watch these teams play in the postseason. On one hand, you don't. Santander and Burns kind of don't get that postseason bump. The Jordan Montgomery style bump of potentially getting some more money as they play through October, especially for Santander. Burns is getting his check no matter what, but that could help the Orioles a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of transitioning into off-season mode at this point, but definitely was in a better mood when I was on last time.
How long does it take you to process a loss like that, bounced out so quickly with pretty high hopes? I mean, for me, it was like a weekend, and then I was ready for the off-season. Unfortunately, there's games still to be played, I guess, but how about for you?
Yeah, it was probably the next week. I think it fully happened once the Royals got eliminated, because then we were kind of at the point where I was like, well, if the O's would have been eliminated at this point, I could have at least taken that a little bit better if they got knocked out by a team that was probably better than the Yankees. So probably took until then.
So we'll look ahead now to, actually let's step back for a minute and talk about what happened during the regular season. You've been recapping player seasons over on Locked On Orioles, and I had a chance to listen to your episode recently about Jordan Westbrook. And you talked about maybe how things would have been a little bit different in the second half if Westbrook had not gotten hurt when he did. Kind of give us a little bit of background on that and what your feelings on how that maybe changed or didn't change the trajectory of the season.
Yeah, the splits were kind of absurd. The Orioles were like the third best offense in baseball, up into including that final day of July when Westbrook got hit on the hand. And then they dropped into the 20s for the 6-7 weeks that he was gone. And then the offense was back to top 5 in that final week. Now that final week is 1 week of baseball. It's not much of a sample size, and there's other factors, including the team stopped hitting altogether. They lost Mountcastle, they lost Arias, but Westbrook seemed to be kind of the glue that kept this offense together, and I think he's probably a little more free swing than people think when they have an idea of Jordan Westbrook, and he's probably not the patient hitter that people exactly think that he is, but in general, he probably gives the most steady at-bat outside of Gunnar Henderson, and Gunnar Henderson's steady at-bat is more so you're expecting him to do major damage every time he comes up. Westberg, I think, is a steadying presence that this team needed, and while he maybe doesn't give the veteran postseason experience you'd like, because he played in basically 2.5 games in the playoffs last year, he kind of gives you a different type of at-bat, and I think it was something that the Orioles missed dearly, and this probably isn't super sticky, but he was the Orioles' best hitter with runners in scoring position, and they tanked in that stat when he got injured. So you can match that up at least a little bit.
I'm curious with something that I always think of Jordan Westburg, right, with the offensive struggles. But going back a little further than that, Jorge Mateo, at-bats weren't phenomenal. How much did that impact run production to not have a player like that on base for the top of the order to hit with?
I think it was less of that. He didn't really get on base that much. So obviously losing his speed was certainly a factor. That was a weapon that you could deploy late in games. But I think the reason the Orioles went and got Eloy Jimenez and Austin Slater is because all of their injuries were right-handed hitters. And Mateo was part of that. And you heard Elias say it again and again, we need to get more right-handed, because although Mateo was not a good hitter, he was still a well above league average hitter against lefties. And so you could throw him out there along with Ryan Mountcastle, along with Jordan Westburg. And Ramon Arias actually changed his splits to normal this year. He used to be a reverse splits guy. He hit lefties much better this year. And losing all those guys made the Orioles super susceptible against lefties. And I think for Mateo, it was just, you can't really count on him, but if you can hit him ninth against Cole Reagans, if you can hit him ninth against Carlos Rodon, that's someone that at least a left-handed pitcher has to worry about. And then you can deploy Jackson Holliday later in the game when that left-handed pitcher comes out. And I think he just, at least against lefties, made the lineup a little bit deeper. Now, the Orioles didn't see a lot of lefties in the final couple of weeks of the season, but they saw a bunch in that stretch where they didn't have those four lefties, and that probably hurt them.
First of all, it's pretty rude to talk about Jorge Mateo to the number one Jorge Mateo fan, but that's besides the point. Where do you see the Orioles even having a chance to improve the lineup? Because it feels like they're pretty established going into the offseason at all positions. Even first base was one I pointed out could be improved, but you still have Ryan Mountcastle and Ryan O'Hearn potentially available to split that position. You would think Holiday and Mayo make jumps, but where do you see room for improvement?
Yeah, I think if Santander's back, I can't imagine much more than a Austin Slater type, whether it's him coming back or another veteran fourth outfielder who can play defense and hit lefties. If Santander's not back, I think they'd be willing to spend a little bit of money on a middle-of-the-order bat, just because you're losing 44 home runs of production. That is really, really hard to replace. And as much as I love him, Heston Kjerstad is not going to do that next year. So you're going to need something. I would say the ceiling of player is a Tyler O'Neill type, a guy who plays the outfield pretty well, who just obliterates left-handers and has big-time power. The issue with Tyler O'Neill is he's coming off a career season, so he's going to cost more than he would have this time last year. I just think someone like that will probably be added. I think also if they deal Mountcastle for pitching, which is probably, I think, more than likely to happen this offseason, that the guy that they bring in that's right-handed could be more than an outfielder, could be a first base DH type if they don't know if Kobe Mayo is ready to take over that role. So, but I just don't see anything. I mean, I would call Tyler O'Neill the ceiling, and I think a player like Austin Slater, maybe someone who's a little more productive. I don't know if Tommy Pham fits in this clubhouse or not, but someone like that might come in.
Is Mountcastle actually expendable?
It depends on what you think about Kobe Mayo. If you think Mayo's ready to play half the games next year, then yes. As much as I love Ryan Mountcastle, I don't know if it's the wall, I don't know if it's an injury, I don't know if it's an approach, but he stopped pulling the ball this year. And I get that you play half your games at Camden Yards and you have a better chance hitting the ball out of the ballpark if you go to right field at this point. But man, oh man, like fly balls to the opposite field generally do not turn into hits. And Ryan Mountcastle hit a lot of fly balls to the opposite field this year. And if he's just lost all ability to pull the ball, which is something you can regain, and he still has good bat speed, so I think he can still do it. But I don't know what that was about, because even with the big wall, there's a lot of doubles to be had out there if you still pull the ball in the air as a right-hander. So I think something's off with him. I don't know if the vertigo played a factor there, and he just maybe lost a little bit of his eye at the plate. He still had the bat speed, but the pitch recognition went away. That could certainly be possible, and he's just late on everything. I wouldn't call him completely expendable, because again, if you go into next year with Mayo and O'Hearn at first base, those throws over first better be on the money, or you might be putting yourself in a little bit of trouble. But I do think that they are going to look to find a package that involves him. It's just that his value is not super high right now. So if they wanted to trade him, it would probably be as a piece with someone else to go get a relief arm, to go get a fifth starter. And it's almost like, is that worth giving up on Ryan Mountcastle?
I know Garrett in the Patreon Discord will be happy with that answer, but my prediction was a trade Mountcastle, maybe Seattle, I don't know, for a reliever, maybe in a package for a starter, but sign a Christian Walker to like a 3-year deal in a Mark Canha for fourth outfielder, assuming that they at least make a run at bringing Santander back. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I can see it. I just think they believe in Mayo enough to stick him out there if they move on from Mountcastle. I think they would play more O'Hearn, and that would work with the platoon because you're just going to play him more at first base with a right-hander on the mound. I know O'Hearn's stats kind of dipped a bit, but for a guy who is still productive, it's a team option for $8 million for next year. I think certainly with David Rubenstein, they're going to pick that up. And yeah, his approach is interesting. I think it was interesting what he did to his game this year. He ended up with the same amount of home runs, but in general, it was less extra base hits. But at one point this year, he was like a poor man's Luis Ariz with power. Like, he just wasn't striking out.
Yep.
He was walking just enough, and he was hitting the ball out of the ballpark. He kind of lost the power for a stretch there. But I think he's intriguing. And if you want to have different approaches in this lineup, Ryan O'Hearn's a different approach. The guy struck out less than any other Oriole this year, and you know he has 20 home run power, and you can stick him at first base. And if you really want to send me over the edge, you can put him in the outfield. And you combine all that, I think he's still a productive player for you for $8 million. And if you're looking at a platoon of him and Kobe Mayo at first base as you ease him in, and all Elias said the other day was that it seems like Mayo is more of a first baseman than a third baseman.
Yeah.
That could work. And so maybe Mark Canha is a guy who fills in there a little bit if Mayo is truly not ready, plays some outfield if Santander is not back. And it'd be nice to bring Christian Walker home, but I just think if you have Mayo right there to fill in, it's a little bit less concerning than I think playing Kostka in the outfield every day next year is playing Mayo at first base half the time and DHing him. I don't know if they'd be willing to shell out Christian Walker type money, especially for a first baseman. Because if they're going to pay for a hitter, I think they're going to give it to someone with a little more versatility than just a first base DH.
Totally fair.
Let's talk about Santander for a minute. How much of a priority should re-signing him be for the Orioles this offseason?
In a perfect world, Corbin Burns is number one priority, but we live in the reality where even the David Rubenstein Orioles may not be offering up what he wants just because of how they view starting pitching. And I think the fact that they basically haven't offered anyone a deal of more than 2 years as a starting pitcher over the past few years probably doesn't bode well for them moving up to an 8-year deal for a starting pitcher, even a guy as good as Corbin Burns. So even if David Rubenstein says, I'm willing to give out $200+ million to Corbin Burns, is Mike Elias. And I think Rubenstein, especially in this first offseason, is going to open the checkbook, but still leave the final decisions to Mike Elias. I don't see him being someone who calls up Scott Boras, goes around Elias, and gets a deal done. So that should be number one. In reality, that's probably not going to be the case. So I would still put Santander probably number 2 behind starting pitching depth, just because if you're believing that Burns isn't going to be back, even if you get some sort of Bradish, Tyler Wells, I wouldn't expect that until August at the earliest of next year. And so you need to bring in some guys that can replace what Burns did, and that's going to be really hard to do with one player. So maybe one trade and one middle of the rotation free agent signing. But after you do that, reinforcing the rotation, I still think losing a guy who had 44 home runs for you is going to be really, really tough to replace, even with all these young bats. And I just think, I can't remember who it was that said this so perfectly, that Santander does just enough in the outfield. He does exactly what he needs to do. He does not move a step more than he needs to in the outfield. But quietly, he's a serviceable defender in right field, in that ballpark where it's, a shorter porch in right field. I think you can still, if you give him a 3-year deal, I think he can play out there for the next 3 years. And I think that helps in bringing him back.
Well, you might not be able to force the issue with a free agent signing, even if you have David Rubenstein, like you said. But maybe one place where you can is an extension for a guy in-house. What are the odds you think an Adley, a Gunnar, maybe even a Jordan Westburg could be extended to kind of help change the narrative of where the ownership is with the Orioles this offseason?
Yeah, I know Boras has agreed to some extensions with players, but it's unlikely. The weird part here is Westberg is also Scott Boras' client, so that's a different category than Boras usually operates in, so maybe you have an avenue to that. And the Adley thing is weird because I believe fully that he is still the best catcher in the American League, but I think you want to have him prove it again before you shell out money to a catcher. And catchers are catchers, and even Buster Posey hit his wall earlier than you thought. Joe Mauer hit his wall earlier than you thought.
I don't know. I heard he's got a pretty nice job in San Francisco.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. Adley is headed to the front office for 3 years. The two of them, now there were other injuries, other factors for Posey and Mauer, but those guys break down faster than anybody else. Not everybody is Sal Perez. And so you have to at least let him, I think internally they're probably not super worried, but externally maybe rebuild his value a little bit. And even though he's not Boras, I bet his agency's going to want him to rebuild his value before he takes some money here. So that kind of leads you down the path of like, who would even get extended? Would you try to give some money to Colton Cowser? Would you try to work out a mid-Tommy John extension with Kyle Bradish? Would you shell out some money to, I mean, I don't even know at this point. I mean, extending relievers is not a game Mike Elias is going to be in.
No.
So, you know, are you going to Cedric Mullins and saying, let's tack on one more year to the end of your deal and bring you back for 2026? I think it's a Santander or nothing in terms of the kind of extensions. And really, he's going to become a free agent before they would do anything like that.
Yeah, it's very good points across the board.
Is Cowser Boras? Do you know?
I don't think so.
He's not. Okay. Well, there's my number one candidate then.
Yeah, Cowser is a good call. I wonder if, I don't think Samuel Basallo is going to make the Orioles until at least September 2025, but maybe, you know, international signing, might be willing to sign like a 10-year Ronald Acuna type deal, 10-year, 100, whatever million, maybe. But I think it would go a long way to ease, I mean, who really cares about the generic fan of the world, but to ease the concerns, you know.
The pro-labor side of me cringed, but the Orioles fan side of me said, let's get it done.
Right.
I wonder, on a recent New York Post podcast, Mike Elias said a lot of words and didn't say a lot of things.
Mike Elias went on a New York Post podcast?
He did.
When?
John Heyman, baby.
A week ago. But when you comb through all of what he said, one of the interesting things was that he believes that David Rubenstein and his ownership group will put Elias in a position to build the team in a healthy way, in a way that Mike Elias sees fit. So my question then becomes, you know, does Mike view it as a way of, hey, this is the time to splash the cash? Or does he kind of stick with, you have a lot of players who are under team control that you don't need to spend all that much money on. You have arbitration guys, so your payroll is naturally going to go up. Pay the arbitration guys, and then worry about extensions when they actually face the open market.
Yeah, I think he'll definitely, where this will come up biggest is similar to the things we saw at the trade deadline, where the Orioles said, you kidding me? Absolutely, we'll bring in Zach Eflin and be on the hook for $18 million for him next year. And absolutely, anybody we think has a chance of making this team, you know, I think Emmanuel Rivera might be the only non-tender candidate this offseason. They're just going to give everybody that ARB money, and that's how I think it opens up. And then, you know, you're a little more willing to take an extra step on a mid-tier free agent that you really like. You know, maybe it's, if you love Sean Manaea, maybe you're willing to give him a third year to get him to Baltimore.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you really love, this group of mid-tier, you really love Nick Pivetta, and you're willing to give him a second year that no one else is willing to give him, or a third year that no one's willing to give him, to get him to Baltimore. But I really don't think, just because of the way Elias operates, that he's going to be giving out these 6, 7, 8-year deals, even if Rubenstein's willing to do it. I'm not sure Elias is going to be willing. And again, I think especially in this first offseason, it's going to go to Elias for the final say. And if Rubenstein says, yeah, throw in the extra $15 million to get him, then they'll do it. But if Elias is saying we're not giving more than 4 years to any pitcher, they're not going to bring back Corbin Burns, no matter how much David Rubenstein wants to pay him.
Well, maybe there's a guy they could trade for that has an expensive contract. Maybe I was thinking like Luis Castillo.
That seems more likely.
From the Mariners. Maybe he's not as expensive as you would think just because he's a great pitcher, but he has a big contract. Also, attached to him. Maybe that's where the Ryan Mountcastle fit could possibly be.
I think Elias would be concerned with getting into a bidding war and getting burned, but if you know exactly how much you're going to have to pay a guy, and you can work with Seattle to take a little bit of the money on to get someone like Castillo, who knows if Seattle's going to be trading away a guy like Luis Castillo, but if you're willing to work with a team that doesn't want to hold on to a player for 4 more years because of their contract, the Orioles know this is exactly how much he's going to get paid. This is exactly how we're going to come up with that money. You know how it's going to come up with it out of the Magna Carta fund. But this is exactly how we're going to immerse this money over the 4 years. This is exactly how much money we're going to have left. I see them being much more willing to do a starting pitcher trade that isn't just impending free agent who's still in arbitration, who isn't getting an extension from his current team and is getting traded like Corbin Burns. And maybe it is someone else like a Luis Castillo. I'm not really sure who else falls into that specific category, but maybe a Jameson Tyone in Chicago, where they'd be more willing. They weren't willing to give him that contract when they were interested in him last offseason, but they're now willing to eat it now that it's only 2 years. Yeah.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Your dining room is the heart of your home, where meals are shared and memories are made. At Ashley, you'll find affordable dining furniture in a range of classic and modern styles. Ashley small space sets and extendable tables are designed to fit beautifully into any space, from cozy breakfast nooks and kitchens to formal dining areas fit for a feast. And with mix-and-match seating options, everyone at your table gets the perfect seat. At Ashley, style is served. Shop in-store or online today.
I don't mean to jump immediately back to Anthony Santander. Do you think, would he at all accept a qualifying offer for, I believe ESPN said it was 20.3 or so was the ballpark?
Yeah, it's like close to 21 million. I mean, that's what I think he's probably going to get in the open market, but it's just based on if he can get a multi-year deal. How much does he love being in Baltimore versus how much does he want that stability? Because, yeah, you just hit 44 homers, but on the flip side, you just hit 44 homers, and you're probably never going to hit more than 44 homers. So if you want a multi-year free agent deal, you should probably cash that in now. And the unfortunate part is, as healthy as he's been, and all the stuff that you and others have written about on what he's done in the offseason, he's now past 30, and he's a guy with injuries in the past, and you know what it's like to watch him lumber on or up out there in right field, even though he uses just enough steps to get to any ball he needs to get to. One injury next year, even a freak injury, and all of a sudden you've missed you're on the other side of 30, you're a corner outfielder, and you've missed your chance to get a long-term deal. So I think only if teams are only willing to offer 12, 13 million a year would he consider taking the 21 million. I think the O's will offer it. Because I think getting him back on 20 million for 1 year is no risk for them whatsoever. But I doubt he takes it if anyone's willing to give him a multi-year deal.
I think if you look at the Orioles roster right now, the right side of the field is the biggest question mark. Because you have Santander's impending free agency. We've talked about the shuffling at first base that might or might not happen. But then at second base, Jackson Holliday obviously took his lumps in his rookie season. What is a realistic expectation for him in 2025?
I think to be an above league average hitter and a good defender at second base who runs base as well and steals you 20 bases, I think that's realistic for a 21-year-old with his amount of talent. I don't know if he'll have a Jackson Churio type first full season where he kind of looks like he's lost for a month and a half and then becomes a Rookie of the Year candidate. I'm not sure if that's the case. But I think him to steady himself, to not go through these prolonged spots where he looks like he doesn't belong on the field, and to still play a good second base, turn some double plays with Gunnar Henderson, his sneaky 95th percentile sprint speed out there, to use that to his advantage, to beat out some hits, to get himself on base a little bit more, to use his good eye at the plate a little bit more. And again, if Jackson Holliday plays 75% of the innings at second base next year and finishes with a 108, 110 WRC plus, I think the Orioles will be very happy with that moving into 2026.
Absolutely. So the Orioles have the potential to have 4 first-round picks in next year's draft between qualifying offers for Burns and Santander if they sign elsewhere, and Colton Cowser, potential Rookie of the Year. Do you think that could play a part in the trades like it helped last year to land Corbin Burns? I think it was the Gunnar Henderson draft pick that they traded. Could that play a role this offseason?
It played a role last offseason because they traded that comp pick to Milwaukee because they knew they had the Gunnar Henderson pick right in that same spot. I don't think they were trading that pick. I don't think Elias was trading that pick if they weren't getting that Gunnar Henderson pick. So yeah, I think it helps them be more aggressive if they're able to trade any of those picks. I think they're more aggressive trading those draft selections because they have so many. But yeah, you could look at some of the more mid-tier guys who you have questions about, the Judd Fabians of the world, the Dylan Beavers of the world, and you can get more aggressive with those guys if you think that, okay, if we bring back Santander, we have Heston Kjerstad, we have Cedric Mullins here for another year, we feel confident in Colton Cowser, that we can deal away one of these outfielders, we can backfill because we think Enrique Bradfield is so close, or we think Vance Honeycutt's getting closer, or whatever it may be. Or, you look at maybe the next tier of players. I mean, do you become finally willing to trade away a pitcher potentially in the minor leagues because you're maybe feeling better that if we have 4 first-round picks, we can take an arm with one of them? That's possible that if a team comes calling for Brandon Young, that you maybe consider that in a deal to get a major league arm back, even though you think he'll help you at the big leagues next year, someone that's more established. Maybe that comes into play as well, but I definitely think if they could end up with 4 of those, they're going to be a little more likely to trade the actual pick, or at least trade someone like a Dylan Beavers, like a Judd Fabian. And I think they are. One credit I'll give to Mike Elias, I think they are willing to trade the guys who are lower in the minor leagues at this point. Like, I think they showed that at the deadline. I think they've showed it over the past couple of years. Like, I don't know if a couple of years ago he trades away Zach Showalter with that kind of stuff at the low minors, with that kind of arm as a high school pick. But he said, we got to go get pitching at last year's deadline, and he did it. And they did it again with arms that they really liked at this year's deadline. And I thought the Zach Eflin trade was the best of the deadline by any team, but they gave away 3 players that they really liked. And so I think the next step is, okay, you've given away your best high minors players for Corbin Burns, and you've given away the guys who maybe didn't have a role here but are producers for a project in Trevor Rogers. Are you now willing to go to those next guys to go get some more arms? And I think they will be.
If Zach Eflin was the best trade at the deadline, was Trevor Rogers the worst trade at the deadline?
Probably. In terms of production, I mean, did anybody give their team less production? Now, it's not like they gave up, their A1 number 1 prospect to go get Trevor Rogers. But did anybody give their team less production than Trevor Rogers did? At least in terms of guys that were more than fringe ads, little Eloy Jimenez, Austin Slater type ads. Probably. I think the O's operated on both ends of the spectrum, and I think they had 2 solid reliever moves. They had the best starting pitcher move and the worst starting pitcher move.
2 guys I keep forgetting that the Orioles are going to have next year. First, Trevor Rogers, but Felix Bautista, he's going to be back. He was obviously throwing a lot, even down the stretch. They kept saying he was not an option to come back, but we will have a shutdown if he comes back fully healthy and similar to where he was before he got hurt. A shutdown closer back, Felix Bautista. How good could this bullpen be next year, even without any upgrades whatsoever?
So I think the Orioles pitching development, I have a goal for them next year. I think they need to produce themselves a lights-out middle reliever. It is something that they really have not done yet. They have built a bullpen through the waiver wire. They have built a bullpen through the other guys in trades like Yadier Cano. They have built the bullpen through kind of failed starters. The role Mike Baumann had last year really was, he's pretty good in our bullpen. He was a failed starter for us. Now, I know that Cleveland develops relievers more than anyone does. They strictly draft guys as relievers. But I think the Orioles, whether it's a guy they drafted as a reliever in the mold of a Teddy Sharkey who did get injured and is going to be a major leaguer next year, or it's guys in the mold of Chase McDermott, maybe a little lesser prospect-wise because they want him to still be a starter next season, that they need to just full commit to being a reliever in the minor leagues and go at it. So someone like a Keegan Gillies needs to break through next year. And you can't just throw a Cade Smith on trees. That guy's ridiculous, and hopefully he strikes out Aaron Judge 10 times next week and the Yankee season ends. But I challenge them because I don't think they're signing a reliever. I think their reliever signing was, hey, we don't have a closer, let's get a veteran. It worked out for a half a season, then it didn't. I think they're going to build the bullpen within. I think they're willing to give everybody what they're worth in arbitration. I think they're willing to pick up the option on Sir Anthony Dominguez. They've got enough relievers. But I think from that depth, somebody needs to emerge, whether it's Cade Stroud, whether it's Keegan Gillies, whether Chase McDermott just becomes a reliever next year, becomes that shutdown guy. They need a dude who they can just call up. Like, Andrew Walters was almost an Oriole. The Guardians just called him up for the postseason because they developed him into a reliever. He shot through the system and he was ready. They need, even if it's a failed starter, they need one of these guys to turn into a dude in the seventh inning. And they've done a great job building through the waiver wire, like a fantastic job building the bullpen. But there comes a time when you get so low on the waiver wire that you just can't do it anymore. Like, the Angels aren't just going to give up on Jacob Webb that often. So you need to find guys from your own system, and I challenge them to do that next year. So I question the bullpen next year because Bautista eventually should be himself, but who knows in April if he's going to be himself. They'll probably ease him in next year as well. So, and Yennier Cano has had 2 great years. He had a little forearm something. Don't forget he had a little forearm something. That usually turns into a little elbow something. I wouldn't be surprised if Cano, Elias shows up in mid-February and says Yennier Cano is shut down for the next 3 months. You're going to run these guys into the ground. You need the backfill, and I think the backfill, I think Nick Vespi hit his wall. I think Brian Baker hit his wall. I think they need the next crop of those guys next year.
Yeah, I was going to predict Cade Stroud. Shout out to John Mioli, who's been on top of him for quite a while. I still think he's got potential. He's 27 years old in AAA, but still has this stuff. And maybe Nolan Hoffman, different arm angle, but it's a good point.
I think just really quick on the bullpen, I think the hardest thing last year was building through the waiver wire, the lack of flexibility they had in terms of who they could shuttle between AAA and the major leagues. There was not much you could do. I mean, you had to basically DFA guys, and they were not really willing to do that. So you were messing around with one bullpen spot that you had options for, and you weren't going to option Yennier Cano.
Yeah, your best reliever was basically the one guy with options. And the other guy was Keegan Aiken, who was quietly pitching incredibly well. And they didn't want to burn another option.
They saved the option.
Yeah. So that it was just a difficult, all-around difficult bullpen in terms of you had some guys that pitched great. They did a really good job developing it in terms of finding fringe guys, on the garbage heap, for lack of a better term, from other teams that they'd made, do with. But they need to figure out some way so that they can have more line shifts and refresh a bullpen so that you're not running these guys into the ground as they have.
You can say what you want about Buck Showalter, but that man believed in the Norfolk Shuttle, that you need to have at least half your bullpen have options. And the good teams do have that. I mean, you look at Cleveland, for example. Their big 4 also had options, but Cade Smith, Hunter Gaddis, Tim Herron, Emmanuel Clase, those guys weren't going anywhere. But the back end of their pen, they could rotate through our old friend Gillespie and Pedro Avila and, Logan Allen, the other Logan Allen, and, Joey Cantillo, and all these guys they could bring up and down, and keep them fresh. I mean, Anthony Ghost must have gotten DFA'd and re-signed by the Guardians 15 times in the final month of the year. They need to have more guys that have options. And unfortunately for them, too, there were chances for Brian Baker and for Nick Vespi and those guys to take over a role. And unfortunately, the guys with no options pitch better than them. And you're trying to win games. I think things are going to open up a little bit. I wonder, with Gregory Soto in the fold and with Keegan Aiken, how long Ciano Perez is for this roster. I wonder how long Jacob Webb's UCL is for his elbow. So
pitches every other day.
Yeah, I do think that he's another guy who we could get to spring training and Mike Elias gets on that microphone.
Always a scary press conference.
Yes, I think Webb is going to be involved in that next year. But I just think you need to, and that's where it comes from developing within, because it's really hard to go and get guys who have those options. You got to pay a heftier price for guys with those options. So you got to develop them from within, and whoever it ends up being, if there's going to be guys you get on waivers, they have to be more like, Brooks Kriske, who never ended up in the big leagues with the Orioles this year, but they claimed him off waivers and he had options. And so there has to be more guys like that who come through, get added to the 40-man, and can be sent up and down, and can give you some length maybe as well would be super nice. That I think you could put this bullpen in a better spot next season.
I'm actually really excited about Colin Selby and the changes they made with him. I think he's going to come in shoving next spring.
Yeah, that's actually the guy I was about to bring up is Colin Selby, and I believe he's out of options as well. But is there maybe room for him to sneak onto this roster?
Yeah, I mean, they put him on the playoff roster over Matt Bowman after not being with the team until the final day of September. So that tells you at least something. I mean, it's Matt Bowman. It's not like they kept him over Jacob Webb or something like that. But there's some legitimate stuff in there that the Orioles liked enough to put him in those two big Mets spots and then send him down because they had to make a roster move and then call him back up and put him on the postseason roster. And they've continued to mix and match with this bullpen. But Colin Selby, if his elbow can stay healthy, I think is someone who, if you do lose Luciano Perez and you do lose Jacob Webb and you do have some guys who get injured or just 40-man crunch or whatever it may be, that Selby could definitely be a guy who has the stuff. I mean, they've made the tweaks. He's got the stuff. He could be a dude who comes out of nowhere. He could be, the Orioles were just early on Reed Garrett. He could be your Reed Garrett. He's got the same beard and he's got good stuff. So I throw him out there.
I have a two-part question here. And the second part I tack on because if I don't mention it, or Discord, which has a weird obsession with this part of the roster, is going to get mad at me. But one, can we expect Adley Rutschman to return to form sometime next year? And two, who's backing him up? Is it James McCann or is it someone else?
That guy's a bum, Adley Rutschman. He's going back to AAA. Yeah, I think he'll be fine. Who knows if he'll regain the offensive production of his peak for a sustained number of years, but I think he'll be fine. I choose to take 2.5 years over a half year basically in his production, and hopefully he'll show up fully healthy in spring training, and maybe he seems like a candidate for saying I'm in the best shape of my life when he gets to Sarasota. He's going to give Andy a juicy quote that he's in the best shape of his life when he gets back to Sarasota next year. So I see that on the horizon. Who's his backup? Not Samuel Basayo. He's not ready for that defensively to have that role. I would like to see James McCann back. I think he was a nice backup. I think it depends on what you think about Adley. If you're worried about what he did in the second half, I think then, Kyle Higashioka, the home run stroker, could be headed to Baltimore next year. But if not, and you feel really good about Adley Rutschman, then yeah, James McCann could come back for one more year. I'm sure he likes it in that clubhouse. I'm sure those guys like him in that clubhouse. And we know Corbin Burns liked working with him this year. So yeah, I could see James McCann back on a one-year deal. It's not like, backup catcher's so funny. I think we've passed the Maverick Hanley timeline. I think we're over and done with that one. I think he's a real good depth catcher to have. I mean, maybe someone like Blake Hunt. I mean, they targeted him a bit, that Mike Baumann trade, so maybe he's someone who's got a little more pop than James McCann in that bat. He's 25, he's cheap. Maybe if they get to the point where they don't want to pay James McCann $7 million because someone else does, that Blake Hunt is your guy, but they'll bring in the Michael Perez's of the world in spring training next year and let them duke it out on minor league deals, and who knows, maybe there will be someone on a major league deal, but I think if it is, it's probably most likely James McCann.
Austin Hedges Hive activate?
Yeah, you gotta watch him hit 60 games a year, and we can't do that. It's like a 400 OPS at this point.
But he wins everywhere he goes, as I've been reminded repeatedly.
I don't want to. Orioles fans want Austin Hedges until he comes up first Sunday of the year. And it's a 3-pitch strikeout.
Punt lineup.
Yeah.
I'll wrap up here, although you never know, depending on what kind of questions we get, we might see it before this episode ends. But one move you would make this offseason, they give you the keys, run the Orioles front office, what's the one move you're making?
Re-signing Corbin Burns, but if we're getting more realistic, I think I would do the Burnsian trade again for someone with more than 1 year. Yeah. Luis Castillo is kind of a cool name to bring up, in that he's not cost control, but you have to pay him, and he's he's that proven starter. He's not Corbin Burns, but he's also not Trevor Rogers or Cole Irvin or Zach Eflin. So to go get a guy that you know how much you're going to pay, you're going to have to give up some prospects, but to put in that number one spot, because I love Grayson Rodriguez and I love Zach Eflin, but you need that dog at number one. And Grayson maybe one day will be that, and Kyle Bradish will be back next year to be that. So I would try to find a way to make that move. And that would be my number one go-to, try to find an interesting way, like the Orioles did last offseason, with a little more payroll flexibility this time. As much as Mike Elias wants to, I think, lie and say John Angelos fully approved that move for Corbin Burns, I think that you need to go get a number one.
Now, before you go, tell us what you have coming up on Locked On Orioles. I know that you're pretty busy right now and you're in off-season mode. You've got a lot of good coverage coming, so give our listeners a preview of what they can expect.
Yeah, when you work for a full network, even when your team gets eliminated in the wild card round, you still got to do 5 episodes a week throughout October and November. So every player on the 40-man who's not obviously going to be DFA'd in 3 weeks like Daniel Johnson or something is going to get their own episode to recap their 2024 season, so we're into that. A great part of being off Twitter is I don't go on Twitter. But another part where it backfires is I only learned from Danielle 30 minutes ago that Matt Borg-Schulte took the job with the Twins. Yeah. So that's probably Wednesday's episode. If you listen to tomorrow's episode and you're like, why is Connor talking about how Matt Borg-Schulte could just be the one and only hitting coach? Well, know that I recorded it over the weekend and that hadn't happened yet. So those things are coming up. Tomorrow's episode is an absolute, sicko list of 10 hitting coaches who could come in from outside the organization. Hint, most of them have either Astros ties or work with Brandon Hyde with the Cubs. But it's stuff like that that'll get me through. I actually have not yet even mentioned the fact that other playoff baseball is going on.
Is it?
On that podcast. Unless I'm doing an ad read for Booking.com. Otherwise, I have not mentioned that playoff baseball is going on. So maybe when we get to the World Series, I'll talk about that too.
Well, Connor, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you guys once again. I'm coming up on John Mioli at some point here and Stephen Loftus on appearances on this podcast.
You've already passed Stephen. We have to do the head count between you and John now. You've already passed Stephen.
He's got more clout than me.
Yeah, Connor Newcombe, first Locked On Orioles. And now we have our next guest to bring up. Andy, would you like to do the honors here of introducing your colleague at the Baltimore Banner?
I very much would. My colleague, Danielle Allentuck from the Baltimore Banner. She writes great features and can also complain about my couch, which is a terrible couch. I will give her that. Terrible couch.
Unique skills.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Your dining room is the heart of your home, where meals are shared and memories are made. At Ashley, you'll find affordable dining furniture in a range of classic and modern styles. Ashley small space sets and extendable tables are designed to fit beautifully into any space, from cozy breakfast nooks and kitchens to formal dining areas fit for a feast. And with mix-and-match seating options, everyone at your table gets the perfect seat. At Ashley, style is served. Shop in-store or online today.
For those wondering about his couch, he's in his mid-20s and has a futon that's been around probably longer than he's been alive.
It's a great couch. Got it for free.
You haven't gone on Wayfair yet and gotten the build up a couch for $400 or whatever it is?
No, I don't think I ever will. Never will.
So, Danielle, it's coming off another short postseason appearance for the Orioles. I don't know that it was a terrible surprise going in to see them struggle the way they did, but the offense really failed to show up in that series against the Royals. And now we're seeing these changes to the coaching staff come in. Just give us your thoughts on whether or not maybe this team needed a change in direction or a change in voice for the philosophy of this offense.
I think that they definitely needed a change. I think you can blame some of it on the injuries. I think, especially in the postseason, Jordan Retsburg, not even close to 100% healthy. I think Ramon probably was still dealing with some stuff. Mountcastle too. So I think part of that is to blame. And you can make the argument that the hitting coaches didn't take a single at bat, but also at some point it's their job to communicate the information to the players in a way that the players can understand. And clearly the players were not understanding what they were saying. So I think that they need a change. I really believe at least one of the hitting coaches is going to be a guy who came up through the minors with the players, a guy that they already trust, especially a guy that Gunnar Henderson already trusts. But I think that's a big thing that they're going to be looking for. So I really think a guy like Anthony Villa is going to be in high consideration for that hitting coach job because him and Gunnar get along really well, and they've been together since 2019. So I think those are the type of changes we'll see. I think they'll bring up somebody like him, and then maybe an external veteran hitting coach who can kind of be the overall leader for maybe some of the other guys not named Gunnar Henderson.
Now, give our listeners a little bit of background, because I think that this is a big source of contention among Orioles fans. Why are there two hitting coaches when most major league organizations have been operating this way for a while now? This is not a new concept, but how do those roles complement each other on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so they're really three hitting coaches, if you include Cody Ashley. And I remember asking Cody one time what's the difference between his job, which is technically offensive strategy coach, and hitting coach, and he could not give me an answer because there is none. So basically they have three hitting coaches. They all have very different backgrounds. One's a teacher, one's an analytics guy, one's a player. And I think that they have the three different coaches so that like each guy, you know, whether they think analytically, then they can go to somebody. If they, you know, need to be sat down and taught the X's and O's, they go to somebody else. I think they just have three different personalities to kind of try to appeal to how everybody learns. I think there's probably some dynamic that we don't know about how they work together, but their jobs were all essentially the same at the heart of it.
Yeah, I think too, just like also you have one hitting coach in the middle, like in the dugout, when they're talking about who you're going to face at the next plate appearance. And then you have one hitting coach that's in the cage inside that's preparing somebody for a pinch hit in the seventh inning that against two pitchers. So as you mentioned, like every team basically has multiple hitting coaches. The Orioles have multiple pitching coaches. Like this is the name of the game at this point. I will jump in to ask a question. I'm curious, when you look at the overall coaching staff changes, do you believe that Brandon Hyde did he deserve, and I'm probably putting him on the spot and I don't mean to in a black and white manner of should he have been fired or not necessarily asking that, but did he do a good enough job in 2024 to get the best out of this team?
I don't think it's a yes or no answer. I think he did okay. I would have liked to see him not blame on the injuries. I think that's where him and I kind of butted heads a lot in the second half was he would blame it on the injuries, and I would say, okay, but Gunnar's not injured, Anthony's not injured, like these other guys are still there. And we would go back and forth on that. So I think he has one more year. And if he doesn't show it next year, I think it's right for everybody to call him out. I think this year, I thought he managed the playoffs fine. I didn't have any issues with how he managed it. I had issues with how he managed it in Texas, but I thought he did a fine job there. I thought he showed improvements as a manager in that way. But if their stars keep going downhill, he has to be to blame after next season.
We've kind of talked about what the possibilities are this offseason to improve the team, but what is your take? What would you like to see the Orioles do to try to get over the hump in the preseason?
I think a couple things. I'm a big believer in bringing back James McCann, and you can talk about his catching skills.
So is my wife.
You can talk about his catching skills all you want. He was the leader of that clubhouse, and he is the most respected guy there. And I think you lose a lot if you don't bring him back in that sense. And I think he's a serviceable backup catcher. I think he probably caught a lot more than he needed to this year just because Adley was slumping. But I think you bring him back for one more year until Samuel Basayo is ready to take over. I think you bring back Anthony Santander because qualifying offer is not a lot to really in the grand scheme of things. I think you bring in another veteran bat where they play. I'm not sure. Maybe it's just DH. That's fine. And I think you need probably a fourth or fifth starter in there. I think you can't count on any of your Tommy John guys coming back because the timeline is 12 to 18 months. And 12 months puts them realistically mid to end of June. That's only if everything goes right. There you have 3 Tommy John guys, 2 if you don't count John Means. Not everything's going to go right. I think there's a good chance Tyler Wells is going to come back as a starter. I think there's a good chance he comes back as a reliever. So they need some more starter depth. You can't count on Kane Povich, Chase McDermott, Brandon Young being completely ready for a full season yet.
I want to talk for a minute about kind of the makeup of the clubhouse. There's been a lot of focus on the youth of the Orioles roster. It is still a young roster, even as these players get more years under their belt. Do you think the team was really lacking veteran leadership or a veteran voice in the clubhouse down the stretch, or was that perhaps overplayed a little bit externally while the team was struggling?
I think it was overplayed, but I think that they could have used more. So I think kind of both were true. I think some of the Twitter rumors about the young guys not taking it seriously, coming in late, is completely bogus. The young guys are the first guys there every single day. And we know that because we're there 5 hours early, and those guys have already been there for 2 hours. So never seen a young guy come in late, never heard of that whatsoever. If anything, Anthony Thompson there and the other veterans are the ones showing up an hour before the clubhouse opens because they can. They know what to do.
Yeah.
I think it was a very different clubhouse dynamic this year. I think Adam Fraser was low-key a big guy, Aaron Hicks, those guys the year before. Danny Coulombe's a big clubhouse guy. He was gone all year. Corbin Burns is just a very quiet guy. He was just there for a year. He's not the leader there. Zach Eflin didn't show up to August. He's not a leader. Maybe he will be next year. We don't know. But it really was James McCann and nobody else. Cedric Mullins is a very quiet guy. He'll take guys on one-on-one, but he's not the rah-rah, stand up in the middle of the clubhouse, yell at people type of guy. So I think they could have used, somebody else to help out some of these young guys, but I don't think a trade deadline acquisition would have done the trick because already the trust of your clubhouse is also a big thing too.
Yeah, obviously a lot of narratives that fans and people can run with, but how much of that is like actually true? There's like the hitting coaches need to go. Why do you have so many hitting coaches? Brandon Hyde not doing a great job, the injuries. How much of it was just that's baseball, bad luck, you lose 2 one-run games in the playoffs and you're out, and how much is like they could have controlled and changed?
Maybe a little bit of both. I don't think it was bad luck. I think it was very clearly everybody was trying to be the hero, everybody was trying to hit a home run, instead of just playing smart, casual baseball like it had been all year, especially in the first half. I think all of these things will help, but I think if they don't change that philosophy of how they approach the playoffs, nothing will ever change. Just because they have a new hitting coach doesn't mean that the organization's strategy is going to change.
I'm curious, I kind of know what you might say already, but when you look around that clubhouse, there's a lot of star names. Gunnar, Adley, Burns is not coming back, but last year Burns. Who was perhaps the heartbeat of that clubhouse? Who made it so that when things were maybe going sideways a little bit, just their presence in getting there early or a clutch 2-out hit? I mean, who was that guy for the Orioles this year?
Who do you think my answer is?
I think it's Jordan Westburg.
Yeah. Jordan Westburg's that guy. So much that guy, he tried to make himself outgoing when he was injured. He wanted to become a rah-rah guy because he didn't know what else to do. It's all he could think of to do. He really failed at it. He hated it. He tried hard though. But yeah, it's true. And I think we really saw this year Jordan Westburg emerge into kind of more of a leader there. And I think he could be that veteran guy in a couple years. I think he's really going to come out of his shell a lot more. I think he's a lot more outgoing than we think from the outside. I've asked Jordan Westburg a question one time. He talked for 7 minutes. So he's a very talkative guy once you get him going. So he's really well respected. Just the fact that when he was injured every single day, he was working out with his good hand, which is a non-dominant hand, just because he wanted to do something every day. And I think guys are kind of like, okay, if he has a broken hand and he's working out with his other hand, surely I can go put in some extra work too.
I think it's easy to forget how young the core of this team is. Like a lot of 22, 20, 21 Mayo and Holiday, even early to mid 20s. Shit, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, we were ahead of schedule in 2023, and people say we're behind schedule in 2024. Is 2025 when we're right on schedule? as far as like just lining up the ages and the timeline of the development of the core of this team moving forward?
I mean, you would think so. I think that a lot depends on what they do this offseason as well. I don't think that they have enough if they don't do some things this year, or at least if they don't do stuff in the deadline next year. I think the thing is, you have Jackson Holiday, surely is still young. The rest of these guys aren't that young anymore. Gunnar Henderson's going to be in his third season. Jordan Westbrook will be in his third season. Adley Westman will be in his third. Like, Adley's going to be 26, 27 next year. And you look at all these other teams in the playoffs. I asked Michael Elias and Brandon Hyde this question. You guys keep talking about how they're young and that's why they failed this year. How come other teams, young guys, can perform well? Those guys have never been in the playoffs before. Your guys have. So I think at some point, it's just the team getting past the mindset of we're young and inexperienced, and sort of realizing that they're not anymore. They're not the underdogs by any means.
I think that's a great point. And they didn't necessarily have a good answer to your question when you did ask that. When you look around Jackson Merrill, Jackson Churia, I guess those are two Jacksons. Now we're talking about Jackson Holiday. What needs to happen for some of these young guys in Baltimore to take that next step and be? We did see with Colton Cowser, who struggled last year and then came up this year and was a lot more consistent, even though strikeouts were probably higher than he wanted. But what needs to happen for a Jackson Holiday or Kobe Mayo to be a more productive major league regular at the same age that guys in Milwaukee and San Diego are doing?
I think that it's very normal for guys to struggle when they get up to the majors, but the Orioles players seem to struggle extreme when they come up. And it is very consistent across the board. I mean, Gunnar maybe didn't struggle in 2022, but in 2023 he was one of the worst players in a major league in April and May. Obviously he pulled it around, but I think something needs to change in the organization about how they prepare these guys for the majors. I'm not smart enough to know what it is. But you look at all these other teams and their guys are struggling, but they're not tanking like these guys are when they come up. They're not striking out on every pitch, suddenly becoming different players. So whether that is maybe something as simple as having a hitting coach they're familiar with up there, maybe it's they need that veteran to take them under the ring, or maybe it's just something they need to change in AAA or maybe even their evaluation of these guys. Maybe they're not ready when they're coming up. But that to me is what needs to change in this organization.
Well, and I think you bring up an interesting point, because it's something I've been thinking about this team for a while, especially since the playoffs, which is that there's a real volatility to this offense. A lot of hot and cold. I don't know that there's a simple answer to solve that issue, but it does seem like something they need to solve this offseason.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't know what the answer is, but
we don't get paid to figure that out.
Smarter than me should probably figure that out.
Let's talk about Adley Rutschman for a moment. And I think that when you look at the data, it's undeniable that he was a different player after he was hit on the hand in June. Yet he and the Orioles have insisted for months now that that was not behind the slump, even though everything points to that. So what have your thoughts been watching him, trying to get answers to that question about what went wrong with Adley for the final 3 months of the season?
That's another thing I would love to know the true answer to. I don't know if we ever will. It could be like Cedric, where randomly this year it reveals that all of 2023 he was playing hurt, even when he wasn't on the injury list. Maybe suddenly he'll reveal that, but I don't think Adley will. I think if he was hurt enough, he would have been on the injury list. I really do. I don't think anybody is that tough. If they were playing through something that severe, they wouldn't have been out. But if you look at this team, I did the math at one point of when Adley gets a hit, their record is insane, the number of wins they have. When he doesn't get a hit, they're pretty much guaranteed to lose. So that, to me, kind of outlines what happened to this team in the second half is the guy that they rely on just went away. I don't know what happened. I mean, I think you can look at the stats all you want, but I don't know if we'll ever truly get the full picture of what was going on with them.
On a different note, Colton Cowser, we just talked about him and how he was able to overcome that sluggish stint that he had in 2023 to turn into a really productive player in 2024. It seems like the Rookie of the Year race really is down to him and Luisio. I mean, I know it's been decided, but do you think that he has a chance at winning the award?
I do. I don't think it was a very competitive year. No offense to the guys who are going to be candidates. I think that they all had good years, but it's not a runaway job like it is in the NL or like it was last year. But I think Cowser probably did do enough. At least he'll be second, maybe. But, you know, he had a very hot and cold year too, and he'll be the first one to tell you that, you know. He had a really, really good April and then kind of went away for a while and then would come back and go away again. I think we saw a lot of improvements from him, but I kind of wonder if that's just who Colton Cowser is going to be as a player. And he's going to play every day because his defense, they need him in left field.
Yeah, it's a huge left field, so you kind of need a center fielder type in left, and Colton's definitely that. I'm curious, hypothetical here. Anthony Santander departs in free agency, does not return as a Baltimore Oriole. What the heck do they do in right field? Is Heston Kjerstad ready for 140 games as the right fielder of this team? Do they have to go get a platoon guy to hit against left-handed pitching that can play right field? What is the answer? What does Danielle Allentuck say Michael I should do?
So I was very hard on Heston Kjerstad's defense after Austin Hayes got traded. Turns out Heston was still concussed. And as somebody who's also had a lot of concussions, I feel very bad for the reporting I did on him. So apologies, Heston. I think he's a better defender than we think. I don't think he's great. And I think that's just kind of how he's always going to be. I think he's always going to be a little bit questionable, but I think he plays because he has that. If they don't go out and get a right fielder, they need to go out and get a DH. Like they need another bat in his lineup if they don't have Anthony Santander. Maybe they don't have to play in the outfield. Maybe they can find another spot for them. Maybe at third base. There are other spots where they can fit somebody in, but they can't strive without that production.
Opposite scenario, what if Anthony Santander is signed for a 3-4 year deal? He's locking in right field for the next several years. Then what do you do with Heston Kjerstad? Could he lead a trade package for like a Garrett Crochet type from the White Sox? Or do you bring him in as that extra hitter, DH, first base, right field, pinch hitting, etc.?
I think he's your fourth outfielder next year because I don't know who else would be at this point. I think they have some guys coming up. I think they love Enrique Bradfield Jr. as a potential center fielder in a couple years. But I think maybe Enrique replaces Cedric Mullins. Maybe that's where he fits in after next year. So I don't think they should depart Heston because I don't know who else they have who would be major league ready at this point to fill that spot.
Talking about the outfield for a moment, I want to ask about Cedric Mullins because we saw really two extremes this year. He didn't hit for the first 3 or 4 months of the year, but over the last 2 months of the season, he was really good. And frankly, he was one of the only Orioles who, in the playoffs, rose to the moment. What do you think we can expect from him in his contract here in Baltimore?
I think for Cedric, it all depends on his health. I really do. I think his injuries in 2023 impacted him into 2024 way more than people realize. And he was kind of fully healthy in the second half, and we saw the player that you saw a couple years ago. So I think if that's the case, that's how he'll play again next year. It's just he is very finicky. He's in his 30s now. He's had a lot of groin abductor injuries, so I think it just depends on how healthy he can stay.
If he's healthy, Mullins. Does it matter so much about, obviously his offense will be a plus, but does his defensive value mean that maybe you would want to keep him around longer after, obviously this is final year of arbitration, but maybe if you work out an extension of some sort, maybe 2-3 years, is the defense almost enough to say, hey, you're going to hit 240 at your worst, but outfield defense is such an important thing for us that we want you in the lineup every day?
I think so, as long as they bring in another bat somewhere else. I don't think you can just rely on him to be that guy. Like if you have Anthony Santander for 3 years, sure, extend Cedric Mullins. That makes perfect sense. Because Enrique Bradfield Jr. is not going to be a guy to go out and hit 30 home runs. He's going to steal 30 bases, but he's not going to hit very high.
Fully agree. I like Bradfield a lot, but the power just is not going to develop anywhere close to that. We've been talking a lot about first base tonight, and that seems like a position where the Orioles can improve their offensive productivity. There are questions, I think, about whether or not Ryan Mountcastle is expendable, which we just talked about earlier, and whether or not Kobe Mayo fits into this roster. How do you see that position shaking out over the next few months?
I don't think you get rid of Mountcastle. I don't see any reason to at this point. I think you can expect Ryan O'Hearn. I think we've seen his ceiling, and his ceiling is good. His ceiling is not great. Great guy, but I don't know how much more he can offer this team, and I don't know if maybe you give him the option this year, see what Kobe Mayo can do at first base, or if you say goodbye to Ryan O'Hearn and just go all in on Kobe Mayo. They like him at Kobe Mayo at first base more than they like him at third base at this point, so maybe he can be the backup there. And that would open up, a tiny bit of payroll for this team, and I think that's maybe the likely road that they go down.
I agree with that. Sorry, Connor. That I wonder, is $8 million team option for O'Hearn? I guess it's a mutual option, but basically team option at that point. Is that too steep of a contract for a 32-year-old who tapered off near the end of the season? Power numbers, home run wise, were still there, but as we mentioned earlier, extra base hits weren't necessarily there. I guess that's the first part of the question: is the $8 million option worth it? Second part is, do you try to keep him because he is a lefty, and you want that mix? I mean, Mayo and Mountcastle would both be right-handed hitters.
Yeah, I mean, I see that, but you can just fill in another left-handed bat somewhere else in the lineup that doesn't have to come from first base. Kobe Mayo is going to cost $700,000, so are Kobe Mayo and Ryan O'Hearn really that different at this point?
We'll find out. Yeah.
We've had this annual discussion now about Ramon Urias and Jorge Mateo, whether or not they stick on the roster. Is this the offseason they finally move on? Is this the offseason that we finally put that conversation to bed?
No. They're both back next year. Sorry to break it to you.
Yeah,
They're both going to be on the opening day roster. When they got injured, everybody wanted them back.
Yep.
Everybody was dying for their injury update. So I think they're both back next year.
I agree. And this is also, I pointed this out recently, this is going to be the first year that they're not blocking anyone. There's no one at AAA right on their heels for those jobs. So it seems like if there's ever a time to keep them around, it's now.
Yeah, and I don't think they're going to be playing every day. I think you have, Jackson at second, Gunnar at third, Jordan at... Yep, I did it all wrong, but you have those three guys starting every day, and then you have, Ramon and Jorge on the bench, filling in as needed, or when injuries come up. But I think that their roles are bench players, and I think next year they finally get to be bench players.
How much can we expect from Felix Bautista when he's back next season?
I don't think we have any way to know. I've seen him throw bullpens. He looks good, but I don't have a radar gun. It's always from a rear angle because we can't go that far when they're throwing that early. I think if he's even half of what he was in 2023, he's a great addition to this bullpen. I think we'll find out really in spring training how he's looking, but they say he's fully healthy. He's pitching up from mound, he's doing all the right things now. So I think fans have a right to be hopeful about him.
Earlier this year, we actually had you on right before the season started. It was after it had been announced that David Rubenstein and his group would soon be taking control of the team. And you pointed out in an interview rightfully that we really had no way of knowing how that was going to affect payroll, how long it was going to take for them to start spending more. We are now roughly 6-7 months into this group. Do you think we're any closer to knowing that answer?
No. They haven't spent any money yet. You can say they picked up Zach Eflin for $18 million, but they also cut payroll at the deadline, so you can't even really even that out. So I think this is the offseason. I keep saying this is a test for David Rubenstein to see how much he's willing to go all in on his team. I think when we find out how much he's willing to spend is how we're knowing what an owner he's going to be. But so far he's done nothing, to improve the team himself.
He has thrown a lot of hats.
Yes, he's very good at throwing hats to the people who can afford expensive seats and therefore can probably afford the hats already.
Yeah, I think the next few months will say a lot for his ownership.
I do want to go now to a question Baltimore Banner, excellent baseball coverage. You, the two of you, Danielle Allentuck, you have a really good podcast, the Banner Baseball Show. Yet every time I pull it up on iTunes, there's an explicit label. There's never any swearing within the episodes. What is going on there?
Maybe Paul cuts out all my swearing. I don't know. Do you see the one where we got kicked out by the Yankees stuff? Because there was some swearing in that one.
No, I didn't see that one.
Yeah. The day they clinched, or the day after they clinched, somewhere in that time frame.
We'll have to ask Paul about that.
There's not a lot of swearing on our show, but I really struggle to rein these two in, Bob and Nick.
Well,
yeah. I mean, you dropped the F-bomb the last time we had a live show here, so.
I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
All right, so Danielle, we'll go with this question here. We've talked about this in every guest we've had on so far. One move you would make this offseason?
A veteran bat on a multi-year deal, and a known good clubhouse guy, not just a guy who's going to sit in a corner by himself.
All right, absolutely. Danielle Allentuck of the Baltimore Banner, thank you so much for your insight.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Your dining room is the heart of your home, where meals are shared and memories are made. At Ashley, you'll find affordable dining furniture in a range of classic and modern styles. Ashley's small space sets and extendable tables are designed to fit beautifully into any space, from cozy breakfast nooks and kitchens to formal dining areas fit for a feast. And with mix-and-match seating options, everyone at your table gets the perfect seat. At Ashley, style is served. Shop in-store or online today.
Now, let's go to some questions here from the audience. Anybody have a question for us? What up?
First off, this year I didn't get to watch as many games. I definitely listened to a lot of games, but I noticed at the beginning of the season, Adley was a little more lean. By the end of the season, he was more looking like me. So I think he wasn't able to work it. But anyway, do you think that Nick Vespi hasn't been given the proper shot? Because, he had 12 innings or 12 appearances this year, 25 last year. Of course, last year he wasn't as good, but this year, he did pretty decent. He had a sub-3 ERA. The option thing, sent him up and down. Do you think he didn't get his fair shot?
Well, I think if Adley looks like you, that means washboard abs, total six-pack. People watching at home. Looks great, apparently, according to this guy.
I think with Vespi, great guy to have while he has options. He's got a different look than your typical reliever. I just think they wanted to limit the looks to him because I think the more a major league team can see him, the more they can take advantage of his deficits, which in AAA can kind of get covered up a little bit. So I think it was intentional, the fact that he didn't get as many consecutive looks in the major leagues. I hope it works out for him. I think he's a good guy, and he's got a good slider. So hopefully he lands somewhere, whether it's here this year or not.
Yeah, I mean, lefties tend to, if you're at all competent as a lefty, you get chances. He did have opportunities here. They were limited, as you pointed out. I like how the slider played. The fastball was unexceptional, and I think if he pitched in more leverage situations, the mix of those two pitches might get exploited a little bit. But at the same time, I mean, it's not. Orioles don't have a crystal ball. I mean, we saw what Caleb Hort did with the Houston Astros, and he was in 2024 spring training with Baltimore. I was a big Caleb Hort guy, and it didn't work out in Baltimore, and he went to Houston and was very good. We saw last night Reed Garrett pitching for the New York Mets, and he, the game was kind of over already, but he's in the doggone NLCS, so it's guys that have been in the organization. Sometimes They're passed around to organizations that value similar things with their relievers. When it comes to does it necessarily work? Sometimes it takes a new voice, a new location, a new opportunity to make something work. So I don't necessarily blame the Orioles in any way for Reed Garrett. I mean, he didn't perform to the high enough level as he needed to as a non-roster invite in 2023 to make the roster. To Nick Vespi, I think he's one of those relievers that he's going to stick around for a while in professional baseball, be that MLB or AAA. It's just, again, with that roster crunch, there was only so many guys you could option, and he was one of those guys you could option, and they pitched him when they felt like they had a chance, and unfortunately it didn't work out for in the long term, but hopefully in the future he does land someplace.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that you can write off Nick Vespi entirely, but I think for the Orioles, maybe they weren't sold on the fastball. And he didn't, I think he never really got the fairest shake in the sense that there was not an extended runway for him to come up and succeed or fail in the majors. But there probably was a large enough sample size to know what you had in Vespi. And that was a pitcher who had some good secondaries, but not a great fastball, and that could have posed challenges for him.
If it was 2019 to 2021, he'd be Paul Fry, but unfortunately, he came around when the team was more competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. To that point, I think Mike Ballman would have probably stuck around all year if you had had that bullpen. Any other? Oh, Andy, go ahead.
Oh, I'm just going to say, I love Mike Ballman. Good guy.
Any other questions from the audience here?
World Series prediction.
Yankees fan in the audience says World Series prediction. I originally, for the banner, picked Padres versus Houston, so I pray that nobody put money on that. At this point, you did?
No.
Oh, thank goodness, thank goodness. I think at this point we'll go with Dodgers, Yankees. Ohtani does it and hits a dramatic something, and it's going to be a storybook ending for Major League Baseball, as if they scripted it. For the Dodgers. Yeah.
I'll say Subway Series, Mets Yankees. Mets win in devastating to Yankees fans fashion, and Jose Iglesias is singing his song to end the Major League Baseball season.
Dodgers over the Yankees. I had Orioles over Braves at the beginning of the year, and that's obviously wrong now, so Dodgers over the Yankees.
All right. Anything else?
I think we're good.
I'll throw out one more real quick. More likely to be back next year, Ryan O'Hearn, Ryan Mountcastle.
Ryan Mountcastle.
Ryan O'Hearn.
I'll go O'Hearn as well.
You really think that O'Hearn is more likely to be back than Ryan Mountcastle?
I think that I'm just going to say that I think that there is maybe a better version of the Austin Hayes trade where Mountcastle goes. Maybe.
Yeah, price-wise they're similar. I think Mountcastle's estimated like $6.6 million in arbitration, and I think it's like a $7.5 million for O'Hearn. But I just think the value to cost to where can this team improve. I think they can use Mountcastle in other ways than just bringing him back and hoping he bounces back.
Well, I'll defer to you guys, 2-1. You heard it here.
One more question here.
Do you think we're in on Soto at all?
Guy with the washboard app says, "Do you think we're getting on Soto at all?" I don't believe so. I don't believe so. Juan Soto is a generational talent and will get generational money. And I don't necessarily think that's here. Although there could be an opening in right field.
John Heyman will tweet out mystery team at one point. Maybe it's the Orioles, maybe it's not. No, I don't think we're really in the running for Soto. I think we'll be more in the running for Burns than Soto. I don't think it's impossible that he's back. I think it's highly unlikely, but I would put more money on Burns coming back than Soto signing with the Orioles.
As much as I would love to say yes, to have the former Hagerstown son patrolling right field at Camden Yards, I'm going to say no. I just don't see it happening. And I just have one more question. And Connor, Danielle, feel free to jump in if you would like here. What's the most outlandish conspiracy theory on Orioles social media right now?
I've been on Twitter in 2 weeks, so I don't know.
Danielle has taken a Twitter break, which is very smart for her mental health. The most outlandish Twitter take, there's so many. There's truly so many. The one about, I think right now, just because it's pertinent with hitting coaches departing, I think right now the lack of understanding of why there's multiple hitting coaches is laughable. Look around the league, man. Makes a lot of sense. We don't need to have a conspiracy about multiple hitting coaches. It's not going to. That's not the issue here.
I have also been away from Twitter for the most part, but I feel like I've heard the Orioles need fire. Brandon Hyde needs to show more fire, etc. They got rid of the only coach that showed fire, and Freddie Gonzalez. I mean, these are professionals. I don't know if fire equals winning, but
I really wish Nick was here right now to answer this question. I haven't been on Twitter in 7 years, so I really don't know. So before we wrap up here, Andy, just plug your coverage over at the Banner, what you, Danielle, Kyle Goon, John Mioli, Paul Mancano have coming up for us this offseason.
Yeah, we have a great team over there. We have a lot of stuff, breaking news, analysis, some features this offseason, a lot of podcasts. Not to rival yours. This is a great podcast, and I always appreciate you including us, the Banner on your podcast. But yeah, if you feel like subscribing to a news outlet that covers many things in Baltimore.
yeah, it's a great outlet. I subscribe, and I suggest to everyone that is a fan of Baltimore / the Orioles / Ravens, they should as well.
Absolutely great coverage of Baltimore, great coverage of Baltimore sports. You can find really good coverage of the Orioles all off-season long on Locked On Orioles. Connor Newcombe, the host there, the Baltimore Banner, Danielle Allentuck, Andy Kostka, Kyle Goon, John Mioli, and Paul Mancano. There's so much good over there. And of course, Bob, Nick, and I will be with you all off-season long. We will be back Wednesday of next week for our new episode. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to check out our Patreon community. Now, Bob, before we wrap up, any final thoughts?
No.
All right, well, thank you so much to the staff here at Checkerspot Brewing. Be mindful of the wind outside tonight and make sure you close the door gently. Tip your bartender as well. Get another round and check out the playoffs here. For Andy Kostka, Danielle Allentuck, Connor Newcombe, Bob Feld, and Nick Stevens. This is Zach Spence. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by BetOnline and part of the Believe Podcast Network.
Your dining room is the heart of your home, where meals are shared and memories are made. At Ashley, you'll find affordable dining furniture in a range of classic and modern styles. Ashley small space sets and extendable tables are designed to fit beautifully into any space, from cozy breakfast nooks and kitchens to formal dining areas fit for a feast. And with mix-and-match seating options, everyone at your table gets the perfect seat. At Ashley, style is served. Shop in-store or online today.
Perfect gifts? We've got them at Nordstrom Rack stores now. UGG, Nike, Barefoot Dreams, Kate Spade, New York, and more. Find everything on their wish list, all in one place.
Steve Madden? Yes, please.
It's perfect.
Did we just score?
The greatest gifts of all time? Yeah.
Head to your Nordstrom Rack store to score. Great brands, great prices. The greatest gifts of all time.
Bingo.
All right, Phil, we're recording now, so it's live. Go ahead. Pick on me the way that you want to.
Did I say that? I wouldn't say that to my son. Man, I mean, come on, man.
Just go. This isn't CBS.
All right, be quiet for a few seconds. Why would people want to listen to the Sims Complete podcast? Well, a couple things. One, if you like to see sons pick on their father, this might be the place. If you want to see a place where the father just kicks the out of his son, this would be the place. What do you like about it, Matt?
Ditto. Father-son dynamic duo talking about the game of football that we love and share and appreciate together. And, hey, it's an extension of what we did, right? Growing up, I was able to watch my father play football, then obviously watch him as a broadcaster. And then he taught me the game of football and shared the wisdom that he learned throughout his playing career. And, hey, sometimes we're full of it and sometimes we actually know a thing or two.
Well, we do a lot of research. At least I do. You're a little spotty, but you hang in there. It's fun. I love doing this, and it's been awesome.
Sims Complete. Check us out wherever your podcasts are available on the Believe Network. Appreciate it. See ya.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.